guys, thanks for joining us on Family Life Today here on YouTube.
Make sure you subscribe. You don't want to miss any episodes, so hit the little bell and you'll get notifications and you won't miss anything. And if this encourages you, like it and share it with your friends.
Yeah, share it with your friends.
Yeah, welcome to Family Life Today.
I was 9 years old when my anxiety first started. It was just this feeling of being worried, but it was a worry that I couldn't get rid of. And it was a stress that I couldn't get rid of. But to be sitting there and find out this is an anxiety disorder was so much more frustrating than I could have prepared myself for.
Welcome to Family Life Today, where we want to help you pursue the relationships that matter most. I'm Ann Wilson.
And I'm Dave Wilson, and you can find us at FamilyLifeToday.com or on our Family Life app.
This is Family Life Today.
All right, let's talk about the last time you experienced real anxiety.
This morning.
This morning? That wasn't anxiety, that was anger.
It was both, actually.
I'll go ahead and tell them.
Okay.
Tell them what I did.
So,
you really think this is my fault?
Yes.
I don't think this is my fault.
We're going to let our listeners
We need
decide.
our listeners to direct message in and tell us.
So you have been sick, and even we're recording outside the studio.
We have a window between us and our guests because, it's the year when you're sick, you got to quarantine.
Right. And you have not been feeling well. And so I was going to bed last night knowing you're sick. And I have this water beside the sink because I take my vitamins every night. So I take the water and I think, if Dave wakes up in the middle of the night, he's going to drink my water. And then I'm going to get sick if he drinks from my glass. So I take my cup. It has ice and water in it. And I put it in the closet, you guys. In the closet. Thinking, he's not going to go in the closet and get my water and drink it. So next morning, I'm drinking out of that cup. I take my vitamins again. I'm walking around the house with the cup. And Dave says to me, "That's not your cup, is it?" I'm like, "What do you mean? It's always my cup." "Yeah." He goes, "Oh, well, I drank out of it last night." I'm like, "It was in the closet."
Yeah, I wondered why it was in the closet. I'm like, "Where's her cup?" "Oh, it's in the closet. I took my NyQuil."
And then why wouldn't you tell me, "Hey, I drank from your cup"? So then I'm like, I'm going to get this sickness. This is going to be terrible. Yeah, so I'm feeling a little anxious.
You're living in the same house. We're sleeping in the same bed. I don't think a little sip from a little cup.
But that just was the nail in the coffin. Now I'm going to get sick, but maybe I won't. I've been praying Lord, help me not to get sick.
You know what? I should have never drank out of a cup in a closet. I did think, why is this cup in a closet with ice? I thought you put it there for me. It's like, how considerate of my wife to put a little glass of water.
I don't even understand.
Anyway, we're bringing all this up because we've got a guest in the studio today. Jamie Grace is with us at Family Life Today. Welcome to Family Life Today, Jamie.
Guys, I think it should be a rule that wives can drink from their husband's water, but husbands, you're not supposed to drink out of your wife's water. It's your wife's water.
Jamie, it's
that's
in the
all
closet.
the time. That's if she put it there, she probably put it there as her secret water.
I'm feeling teamed up on right now.
Well, yeah, that's a rule.
You don't find a cup. Wait, have you ever seen a cup in the closet?
No, I did. I thought, why is this cup in the closet? Never
what if it
thinking.
was a burglar? That would be my first
burglar?
thought. A burglar is coming to steal my nice shoes or something, and he must have left his water in the closet. I just love how you just saw a cup of water in the closet and, must be for me.
That's exactly what I thought.
Yes. Who does that?
I was trying to be considerate and not go into the bedroom and wake you up, so I thought, it's right here, I'll just drink it, and then I should have told you. That was my mistake.
Well, Jamie, I'm sorry you've walked into this.
Oh, I'm all here for it. I'm now convinced that is the perfect Lifetime movie intro. You see a cup of water in the closet, that's where the burglar's gonna leave it.
Hey, you know what? We're done with the water in the closet. All right, we're moving on. You talk about noise. We just create all kinds of noise. And Jamie's written a book called Finding Quiet, My Journey to Peace in an Anxious World. That's why I brought up this anxiety thing. It's Jamie's written this crazy great book about finding peace in the middle of anxiety. But,
Thank you.
I know a lot of our listeners know who you are, Jamie, but I did not know. 2-time Grammy-nominated songwriter, singer, actress. You've got it all going on.
Yeah, you have your own podcast. What's the podcast called?
It's called the Jamie Grace Podcast. Really original. I was like, I'm going to take my name, slap podcast at the end
I'm
of
going
it.
to start listening. I bet you are really fun.
I went online last night.
Yes.
Is this one of them that was nominated?
Look at you. Yes. Oh, you have the strumming down.
I always wanted to be Toby Mac. I love the way you hold me. All right, can you sing? Can you
just
sing?
had her wisdom teeth out.
So I just had all 4 wisdom teeth. They took them away. I don't know if I can.
Oh, I just think
sorry.
our listeners would love it.
I know.
Can you give us one lick?
I think they would love it if it sounded good.
Well,
know what
that
I
never
mean?
stopped me before.
Yeah, I was going to say, Dave doesn't care about that. But
I think you sounded amazing.
Oh, yeah,
you should
whatever.
just take my job.
Yeah,
Your studio's fancy. I'll stay here and talk at the microphone, and you hop on the plane and go sing to the people.
Well, for some reason, I've never been nominated for a Grammy. What do you think, honey? Maybe there's a reason. It takes talent.
you know what I
Real
like about
talent.
you, though, Dave? You'll just do it, you know? But, Jamie, you... You really are gifted in a lot of different ways. And so it's really fun to have you on because you're really fun to be around. But what you've written about, man, it's something a lot of us face and we deal with, especially in the day and age with your subtitle, My Journey to Peace in an Anxious World.
Yeah.
And so when I talk to you, I'm like, you're so positive, you're really upbeat, you're really fun. But this is something that you've really struggled with and dealt with. So take us back. We want to hear your story.
Yes, ma'am.
Take us back into where did this all start?
Yeah. It's definitely, a journey, as you said, and as it kind of mentioned in the book. And I get quite frustrated that it's a journey at times. I'm a very pro-therapy person. And I was talking with my therapist last week. She's so cool. And we were talking and I mentioned something and she was like, oh, well, I think this could be, you might be worried about XYZ. And I looked at her and I was like, oh no, I've already dealt with that. I dealt with that 5 years ago in therapy. So I'm good. And she and I just kind of got in this kind of almost comical conversation about just sometimes we forget that it is a journey.
Yeah.
And we forget that sometimes we might have this anxiety about something and then we feel better about it. And it's okay, I don't have to deal with that anymore. But then something comes up and all of a sudden we're thinking about that anxiety again. And that started for me as a kid. I was 9 years old when my anxiety first started. It was just this feeling of being worried, but it was a worry that I couldn't get rid of. And it was a stress that I couldn't get rid of. I am a pastor's kid. My mom and dad started our church when I was about 2 years old. So we always call it the middle child because there's my sister and then 2 years later was me. Then 2 years later was the church.
That's so true.
Sorry, yeah, I was the youngest child. I'm the middle child as opposed to the youngest.
Yeah.
And so I grew up in church and I had even at 9 years old, I had a very significant confidence in Jesus and
Well, I love you start your book. You say, when I was 7, I made a decision to love Jesus for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
And when I was 11, I was diagnosed with anxiety.
Yeah. It was this thing where it's every 11-year-old, every 40-year-old, every 70-year-old deals with worry and stress. But to be sitting there and find out well, no, this is an anxiety disorder was so much more frustrating than I could have prepared myself for, because as a follower of Jesus, you kind of, at least as a kid, just the practicality of oh, you pray for something and God helps you with it, or oh, you need something and the Bible gives you the tools to deal with it, or and that's just kind of how it works, and so having a generalized anxiety disorder is literally being almost given this pass to oh no, you're going to be panicking about stuff a lot. This has crossed the threshold of an everyday awkward and has moved into no, we can actually show you a chemical imbalance in your brain, and worry is unfortunately a part of your everyday life.
Yeah, what did it look like? You say worry.
So it would be from my mom would say something okay, so we're homeschooled, right? So my mom would be okay, so we're going to hop in the car and we're going to do a field trip today. We're going to, I don't know, go to a museum and learn about XYZ. And within 30 seconds, my mind had already process these statistics that can happen of car accidents in the car and process like, okay, well, what could happen if we get to the museum and I can't remember everything that I learned? Like, am I not smart enough? Am I not good enough? Like, oh, am I homeschooled because I can't go to regular school like everybody else because I don't have any friends? Oh, nobody likes me.
Wow.
Oh, my dad's not here because my dad's at work. Oh, because we don't have a lot of money, even though my dad works a whole lot. And my dad can never really work enough to really take care of the family. But that's not nice to say because dad works really hard. Like, within 30, 60 seconds, like, every possible dramatic and awful scenario would just start mentally taking a toll on me.
The way you just said that, it felt like we were in your head.
Yeah.
It felt like that. Is that the noise you're talking about?
All day. It's all day. And I'm almost 30 now. I'm very grown and wise. And so I've learned some really helpful tools to help silence that noise. But it's a conscious choice to fight that noise. And it's a conscious choice to allow that quiet to happen. But I think even though I have like generalized anxiety disorder, I know for a fact that even people without it have anxiety and have worry and have fear, and we have to consciously choose to like trust in the Lord that the anxiety that's happening in our mind is oftentimes a liar, and trust like the quiet that we are having a hard time procuring is the very thing that we need. So it's a lot of active reacting on a daily basis for me to combat the anxiety that happens naturally. And then, in addition to that, at 11, I was diagnosed with a tic disorder called Tourette syndrome, which is a movement disorder causing uncontrollable movements and sounds called tics. And then also obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD, which is similar to anxiety, but basically causes more actions than thoughts. So like repetitive counting of something or tapping or moving, repetitive like pursuing of textures. Like if I see like a texture, like I need to feel like, oh, I need to go figure out what that is. Or like a texture that I just like cannot touch. I'm like, if that blanket comes near me, I will probably cry. And then also ADHD, which is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, which really just affected all the other, and it's a lot, it's a lot. It's a lot. And I was 11, and sometimes I look back and I'm like, kid, like, were you okay?
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking of our listeners that have kids that maybe have had some of those diagnoses, you know, or maybe they're dealing with anxiety and depression. Yeah. And to look at you on the outside, I would never know any of that. And plus you're super successful. You're doing a ton and you're young. So as 11, here you are. You've had this, crazy diagnosis with a lot of different things. Then what?
The first thing was relief. My symptoms really were at their heaviest when I was 9. Between 9 and 15, but the onset of them was like 9 years old when the tics were really bad. I was constantly squeezing my hands, my feet. I had some of my tics were oftentimes injuring myself. So like I would be in the car and hitting my head on like the window. The way that my legs and arms would flail would oftentimes I would hit myself or hit myself in the stomach. And again, these things are all uncontrollable. It's just the way that if you're nerdy like me and you're like, oh, how does this happen? The neurons in my brain that are supposed to signal to do things, there's a little mix up in the wiring. We live in an imperfect world. These things happen, unfortunately. And so the main thing was like my tics. And so getting that diagnosis was such a relief because it felt like, oh, there's a word, there's an understanding.
There's a reason.
Yeah, exactly. I, like a lot of other kids, statistically, this is just much more, but like, I dealt with things like asthma as a kid, which is pretty common, I had like an inhaler just in case I needed it. It wasn't too bad by the time I was in like middle school. So getting my diagnosis of everything else was kind of exciting because in my head, I was like, oh, I'm going to get, I guess, like an inhaler for Tourette. Like, I don't know, like I had never heard these words before, but I assumed they'd give me some medication. But my relief, it dissipated so quickly because I just remember, my neurologist sitting there and saying to my mom, like, hey, just so you know, like, there's no cure for any of this stuff. There's not even medication for it. There are medications that we can try, but nothing nothing is for sure going to work.
And then even the medications you were on, that was rough.
They were horrible. I feel so much for parents that are still going through this today with their children, because now, don't get me wrong, there's been so much research and studies, and we've grown so much in the medical community, and I'm so grateful for all the people that have put in the work. But I mean, if you are a parent of a child dealing with illness, that's a full-time job. And I'm so grateful for my parents because they fought for me relentlessly. Just like I would try one medication and it would have me, dealing with things like hallucinations or sleeping just like day after day after day, or not sleeping at all, or just complete loss of my personality. Like I was on a heart monitor at one time because one of the medications was affecting my heart, and the payoff just wasn't worth it. The benefits of the medication, rather, it just wasn't worth it. So, it was miserable. Like it's tough because, like you said, like if a lot of times when people meet me or if they see me, like 9 times out of 10, my hair is purple or pink. Like there's always something.
It's a little both right now.
Yeah.
It's so cool.
Yeah, it's always, thank you. It's always elaborate. It's always something going on. And I think sometimes I'm kind of like overcompensating for like that childhood like situation that I went through because it was horrendous. This 5 to 7 year gap in my life where I was miserable. It was awful. I was very depressed.
Tell us about your mom that was fighting for you, and even your dad.
Yeah, I'd love to know, did they ever lose it? Were they always patient? I'm just thinking if I'm in the car and my son is banging his head on the window, there might have been times where I'm like, can you just stop that? But obviously it's a medical condition. But,
or as mom, I'm crying. Yeah. I'm thinking, Lord, what are we going to do?
I don't know how they did it. I don't know how they do it now. I mean, I still have stuff. Just think about the very stereotypical dynamic of, the youngest child that's, married and with their first child. You know what I mean? Just like the dynamic of me being like, Mom, like I'm annoying. Like I'm a millennial.
Where did that
mess.
voice come from? That was pretty interesting.
She's got some really
That's
good
my
voices.
natural tone.
Okay.
And we forgot to mention you're married. You've been married for how many years?
3.5 years.
And
yeah.
you have
I have a 2-year-old. Yeah.
So your parents are watching right now, right?
Yes, praise the Lord. But yeah, it's like, I don't know how, like my parents are even still like so gracious and so patient with me. And I mean, that's just the Lord, honestly. But my mom, I struggle to call her a stay-at-home mom because I think she was like a work-on-demand homeschool mom because we didn't really grow up with a lot of money. So my mom was like, I'm going to start a cookie business real quick. So like kind of like that, but she also homeschooled us. And so she is the literal person that took the literal paperwork to my neurologist and said, it's called Tourette syndrome, and my child has it. They could not find out what it was. It was almost 2 years of going to different doctors and all this kind of thing. In the mental health community, it is hard to get a diagnosis, but it's especially difficult for people of color to get a diagnosis and for women to get a diagnosis, just because a lot of the research isn't based off of people of color. And so I was told by my neurologist at a very prominent children's hospital in the Southeast that there was no way I could have Tourette syndrome because I was not a white male.
Really?
And so she said that she thought that I had something called psychotic eyes. And my mom said, that doesn't exist. And she was like, yeah, but I think that's what it is. And my mom was like, bye. So we stopped going to her. And so we found me a new neurologist who still didn't know what it was. And fun fact, if you go and look at my records, I am actually, this is so bad, in my medical records, I'm classified as a white female.
What?
And I think that it was done so that I could get my diagnosis because in the South, they just would not give me a diagnosis. And so my mom is the one that was like, hey, my kid has Tourette syndrome. I dare you to challenge me. And they looked at it and they were like, oh, you're right. And she never stopped fighting for me. And she still does,
You're a mom with a 2-year-old, and it's that mama bear thing in us.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it sounds like, again, I don't know your mom, sounds like she was extremely firm and went after what she needed to get, but also tender and gentle with you. Is that true?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I can't remember one time that she did not, extend me the grace that I needed, really. She's also a very comical and like person. I'm very much a realist as well. You know, don't get me wrong. Like, I remember once I was like 12 and there was something that I was like really obsessing over, like OCD wise. And I was like, well, it has to be this way. It has to be that way. And she like, and for context, I was super nerdy. So I was 12. I was already in 9th grade. And so I was like planning for college and stuff. My mom sat me down and she was like, hey, let's talk about this real quick. She was like, in this house, you can be who you need to be. You can do what you need to do. But I want you to understand something. The world is not going to give you the grace that I'm going to give you. So she was like, I'm never going to tell you not to have OCD because that's not how it works. But you have to be mindful that if college is something you want, if moving out of the state by yourself is something you want, I just need you to be mindful. The world is not like set up for little Black girls with mental health issues. So whatever that means, you need me to go with you. You need to stay with me. You need to stay with me and Dad, like whatever it is. And so I always appreciated how real she was with me. You know, she definitely wasn't one of those moms that was like, just be yourself, baby. The world will deal with it. Because that's not practical. I like that she was like, you be who you need to be. And you do what you got to do. And understanding that the world will never give you the kind of anything that you might feel that you deserve or need.
Did that give you the confidence you needed to become who you are?
I think so. It helped me feel so comfortable with being different. You know, I think so often, even now as a society, we always want to talk about like, oh, we got to like come together and talk about all the things that make us the same. And yeah, that's a beautiful, important thing. But I also like to embrace what makes me different. I wasn't born to fit in with everybody else. I wasn't made to be like everybody else. And so when I went to college, it taught me how to be an advocate for myself as opposed to, well, I have mental health stuff. I have severe anxiety. They better adapt to me. It taught me like, no, I need to learn how to become an advocate for myself. Whatever full-time job I have, I'm also going to have to become a full-time volunteer advocate for me and my mental health. And it gave me a lot of confidence, but like also it reminded me, like I also still call my mommy if I need her, because yes, sometimes I do. Yeah. Like a couple weeks ago, I called her. I was like, Mom, I have a doctor's appointment, and I'm not sure what to say about a medicine that I need for my some arm pain. So and she like told me what to say. I was like, yes.
That's awesome. Well, I'm sitting there, I'm thinking about Philippians 4:19, and you even quote this verse in your book where it says, my God will meet all of your needs, according to the riches of his glory in Christ Jesus. And I listen to you and I think, you're this little girl who was born, like God wasn't surprised at your diagnosis, and he wasn't surprised. I'm thinking of Psalm 139, where it says, he knit us together in our mother's womb. Yeah. And he's looking at you and he's celebrating. Look at my daughter. She has so many gifts. She has so many talents. And yes, she's got some things. I know about those. I'm not surprised by those. Yeah. And yet I'm going to use her. I think that's such a good reminder for all of us. Because sometimes we can look at our brokenness. We can look at our diagnosis. We can look at our kids and we can think, Lord, do you see what's happening? And he goes, yeah, I see your girl. I see you. And I think it's a really good reminder that God is saying, I'm with you. Yeah. I'm with you in it. And you've been a great example. And I love hearing the story of you and your mom, that she's fighting for you and she's speaking truth to you in love and grace. And that's what our Father, God, does for us as well.
And in some ways, that's what we get to do as parents. We get to be the voice of God to our kids. Whether they fit in with everybody or they don't, they're looking at us to be the voice that says, this is what Jesus sees and thinks of you.
Right, exactly. No, I love that so much. And, you know, especially what you were saying about, like, the Lord just, like, not being surprised, you know? Like, it takes me to this incredibly vivid memory. I have, like, a collection of, like, 34 very vivid memories from childhood. It's so random. But I have this one. We were waiting for my mom to, I think, come out of like an antique mall or something. And my dad and I were sitting in the minivan and I was doing some gymnastics in the car. And I was
in the car.
Yeah. I mean, I'm really talented. And so it was horrible, but I was maybe 8 or 9. Yeah. And, he does a pastor. And so he's supposed to know all. To my surprise, he does not know all. It was very disappointing. But I asked him once, I was like, Dad, can you just tell me, if God is so smart, like, why doesn't he just tell me everything that's going to happen?
Or even the question that a lot of us ask is, Lord, you could heal me.
Yeah, exactly.
Why don't you just heal me?
Exactly. And I really thought I had it all figured out. I was like, Dad, all God has to do is just fix it. He's like, tell us everything. And I remember my dad, he looked in the rearview mirror. My dad is he's so beautifully poetic and dramatic. He could have turned around, but I feel like he was doing this for dramatic effect. He like looked in the rearview mirror and he was like, this is not his voice, but it has to be for the story. He was like, well, if he told us, we would not have a reason to trust him, then would we? I was just like, that makes so much sense. Like, my mind was blown. And then I told him and he was like, man, he's like, I'm going to preach that one day. And I just remember telling him, I was like, no, Dad, I'm going to preach it. And I like to remind him, like, I'm preaching it, Dad, like I am, because I try to make that my life's work of just like, I'm trusting the maker here. You know, I could be healed of Tourette syndrome tomorrow. Like, yeah, I could beg God to just tell me the plan for the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years. You know, I could go there if I wanted to, or like, I'm just choosing to trust him. He's not surprised by any of this. And so I'm just choosing to say, okay, Lord, you've put me here for a reason. You're allowing me to walk through this stuff for whatever reason that might be. And I always try to remind myself, like, Job went through worse, so at least I ain't Job. So, like, you're allowing me to go through all this stuff. I'm here. I'm present with you, Jesus. I'm just choosing to trust that you have a purpose for all of this, you know, that is so much, much greater than what I could plan for myself.
When it comes to the topic of mental health, many of us think, I wish I could just get better, or I wish my friend could just get better, I wish my spouse could just get better. And as Dave and Ann Wilson have been talking with Jamie Grace today, she's helped us to see that mental health is a journey. Sometimes when you struggle with things like anxiety, worry, fear, and even deeper things like Jamie has, like Tourette syndrome and hallucinations and ADHD, you can want to get to the other side and just be better. But discovering that Jesus is with you in that process of the journey, not necessarily just the destination, is such an encouraging word. You know, Jamie Grace has written a book called Finding Quiet, My Journey to Peace in an Anxious World. This is so relevant for our culture and our time right now. And we want to make this great resource available to you over at FamilyLifeToday.com. Request your copy and order one there. And searching for peace is something that we kind of renew ourselves with right now in this Lenten season. The Lenten season is a time that leads up to our celebration of Christ rising from the dead on Easter, and it provides us with an opportunity to focus in ways that we don't ordinarily do during the year. And that's why we thought it was so great that David Mathis is going to be on with Dave and Ann Wilson at the end of the week. He's written a book called Rich Wounds, The Countless Treasures of the Life, Death, and Triumph of Jesus. It's a 30-day devotional that contains reflections to help us pause and meditate on the sacrificial love of Jesus and look into the sacrifice that he made on the cross and then conquered death in the resurrection. If you make a donation all this week in any amount, we would love to send you a copy of David Mathis's book, Rich Wounds, The Countless Treasures of the Life, Death, and Triumph of Jesus. It's our gift to you to say thank you for helping to make this ministry possible at Family Life Today. Again, you can head over to FamilyLifeToday.com, or you can request your copy by calling 1-800-358-6329. That's 1-800-F as in family, L as in life, and then the word today. Thanks in advance for your support, and we hope you enjoy the book. We think you will. Now, if what Jamie Grace has been talking with Dave and Ann Wilson about today has been a blessing to you, or any of the programs at Family Life have been helpful for you, we'd love for you to share today's podcast with a friend or family member. And while you're there, it could really advance what we're doing at the Ministry of Family Life Today if you'd scroll down and rate and review us while you're there. Tomorrow, Dave and Ann Wilson are going to be speaking with Jamie Grace once again, and she's going to be talking with them about how to handle these issues, which we have a tendency to want to do alone, but is never a good idea to remain solo as we're wrestling with mental health. That's coming up tomorrow. On behalf of Dave and Ann Wilson, I'm Shelby Abbott. We'll see you back next time for another edition of Family Life Today. Family Life Today is a production of Family Life, a crew ministry, helping you pursue the relationships that matter most.